Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? Where did I come from? And where am I going?
The way our brain is wired up, we only see what we believe is possible. We match patterns that already exist within ourselves through conditioning.
Ask yourself, who am I? Who am I? Then ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want? And then ask yourself, what's my purpose? What am I doing here? And if you just do that as a start, then situations, circumstances, events, people, relationships will appear in your life to answer those questions. It's the way consciousness is set up. There is only one reality, and that reality is consciousness or spirit, whatever you want to call it, or the life force or intelligence. That then projects itself, localizes itself as this experience that we're having right now. So without consciousness, you and I wouldn't be able to have this conversation. Without consciousness, we couldn't see, touch, taste, or smell, and yet we cannot see consciousness. And yet this invisible force is what is allowing us to see, to doing the seeing, to doing the hearing. So consciousness is the basis of everything that we call reality. And this particular physical reality is a manifestation of our consciousness through this human nervous system.
We are our world. There's no out there. We are, there's no place where we end and everything else begins. We're all connected. And we also have this involvement in creating our reality.
There isn't any out there separated from something we call in here. And that in here-ness is very, very important to the whole equation. It's so important that it's almost obvious, and it's so important and obvious that it's completely left out of our thinking. It began when we began looking at the world and saying, what's going on? And as we began looking at that, we never asked ourselves, who's asking the question? What's asking the question? There is a single unity, a oneness
a unity of which we're all composed. Now, it is impossible. It seems simple. You say unity, everybody should think they know what that means. But if you're thinking that something is unity, then you already are in duality, because you're separated from that which you think is unity and said, that's unity. Oh, well, if that's unity, then where are you? Well, I must be outside of it because I'm thinking it. You have to be in it to be unity, and nobody can think of it. It's like a fish trying to imagine the water in which it swims. You just can't see it. It's part of you already. So that unity consciousness, because it's so unthinkable, is nevertheless the fundamental ground of being out of which everything arises. And this is evident to me, not only from spirituality, but it's also evident to me from the quantum physical understanding of how the universe comes into being. Quantum physics seems to be necessary for this kind of step up, because it says something about the role we human beings play in the universe. It says that consciousness or mind or the activity going on inside of us is playing a role. It says there's a secret underground that seems to be affecting the reality we live in, and that this reality we live in is not at all what it appears to be. Somewhere along the line, a miracle has to happen, and it's disturbing, because science doesn't want miracles. Science wants to have everything explained in terms of objective fact. There is something unobjective or subjective about the nature of reality.
As you go deeper into the physical reality, more and more there's no thing there, but that doesn't mean to say there's nothing there. And what we find is an atom doesn't actually exist, it's elementary particles. Those elementary particles are actually potentials for existence. And so there's no thing there in terms of what we normally think of as things. And that's why I say the physical reality is very different from what appears in the mind. So what appears in the mind is very much things, or we think in terms of particles and those sorts of things. What is actually in the physical reality turns out to be nothing like we imagine it to be.
Ultimate reality and this universe are experienced and understood as constituting an organic whole, in which identity and difference harmoniously interplay. From the perspective of this non-dualistic understanding, it is hard to imagine how disciplined inquirers into the depths of human experience do not eventually awaken to the fact that reality as a whole always exhausts our understanding with remainder. To awaken to this fact is to awaken to the mysterious.
Starting in about the 1600s to the 1900s, we had a classic period of science in that Newton, in his study of matter, and then the laws that govern the motion of matter, gave mankind a very good foundation for reality. Matter and energy were the foundation of reality. Everything else is built off of that. The sciences that came out of that, chemistry, for instance, which is a study how all that matter comes together in particles, how biology, how those particles come together to form a living system. Then neurology, how those living systems form a nervous system. And ultimately, the experience of the mind. in a system like that, the mind actually is just simply matter, and feelings and thoughts come out of the complexity of that mind. It was a very solid platform. Great advances in mankind came out of it. And it was very pleasing to the church at the time, too, because the church at the time was very concerned about this investigation. And they often say Descartes, for instance, in the 1600s, had negotiated a truce with the church, saying that science could investigate matter as long as it was being able to be touched with all the senses, seen and measured. That was fine. But don't go into the realm of spirit or consciousness. Well, that started the change in the early 1900s, where quantum physics gave us an entirely new paradigm of what reality was. All of a sudden, matter was just another level of reality, no longer the foundation. And underneath it was a field of potential. And that potential seems to be linked directly to this idea of consciousness. So, you can see now we have this evolving model of reality, and science changes with that model of reality. It seems that we could say that when our paradigms change, we change. And science is the means by which we go from mythic imagination to something that's usable, repeatable, and productive in our lives. So now we're starting to see right now sort of a shift happening again in science, where there's this emerging sense of consciousness as an essence of reality.
Hunab production.